Hey, everybody, it's Brent Harvey with Actors Hole, and today's a very special interview with a friend of mine, Seph Dietlin, and he's with talktomyangels.com. Seph he's been a friend of mine for like 6, 7 years now. Started as a student of mine, and we've grown into friends, and um, I've been his coach through acting. He's been my coach through the spiritual realm. Which we'll talk about in this interview. We're going to cover a lot of cool stuff, but I want to bring him on today because he, like I said, is an actor, but um, he's a spiritual person, and he's been doing it for many years, and he's got some great insight that I wanted to mesh up how to connect as creatives, how to connect with that, and through some techniques and some knowledge we're going to share today. So I want to welcome you. Thanks, Seph, for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to making contribution.
Awesome, buddy. Let's jump into it.
Well, so I forgot to ask, did I ask what we're going to do with this? You're going to do something with it.
So I have a list of actors that I've collected over the years. And I've shot a bunch of videos, and so I'm going to be sending out like weekly videos on, whether it's kind of like the lectures I used to give in class. So it's like, whether it's, topic about acting techniques or mindset, spiritual stuff. So all kinds of stuff just to kind of help the community expand,
Yes.
grow,
Add value. Yes.
and my whole thing is empower your self-sustaining actor. So whether that's through your mindset, whether that's through creating your own content, things like basically not relying on other people for your success. So it's something I've been kind of trying to figure out for the past 4 or 5 years now. And I really just kind of solidified it and said, okay, I'm going to move forward. So I got about literally a year's worth of emails set up to go out. Like,
yeah,
so
the pipeline. Yeah. So
I'm going to plug this in as one of the first ones. So that, people can, it's going to just be part of the cycle.
Oh, well, first of all, congratulations. And second of all, as we know, that's really exciting, as we're seeing more and more of, is that this period really is about purging the piece inside of us that doesn't realize that it's the one that can create whatever it wants to create. So, when you talk about self-sustaining, all you have to do is imagine the resources somehow, and somehow they're going to show up in whatever way. And so, and that's going to be even, that can have a reverse effect. So if you decide that the economy is going to suck because of COVID, then you'll be on the receiving end of not being able to find an opportunity for yourself, right? And if you decide that doesn't matter and that you're the one who creates.
Well, and that's the thing, is going, okay, the economy, you can acknowledge the economy is going to suck, but it's not attaching yourself to the economy in the sense of going, therefore that determines my destiny. And, as a society, we have been programmed this way. I mean, it's,
right.
If we want to get into that of, it's indoctrinated in us from the very beginning, because our parents and so on were indoctrinated. But, I think a big factor of it, it's religion, it's government, it's like public education, and it's parents. And then you have genetics, what's passed down genetically. So, my whole thing with this is that, where my ego came in was, oh, well, there's all these other teachers and everybody doing this stuff. And what I really had to get to the place of was, and what kept showing up for me was, I have all this information and perspective that I love sharing with people, because I like being a mentor to other fellow actors that I didn't have coming up, no matter where they're at in their stage. And, I'm still learning myself, but But even when I walked away, I said, you know what, I'm done with teaching and I'm ready to just focus on my acting stuff. Like people kept coming to me. And every time somebody would ask me a question or something like that, or even when I watch a video and I'd be like, oh, everybody needs to see this. This is a great bit of information. So I found that when I shifted it from me doing it from a place of acquiring something as opposed to like, can I monetize this? Turn into a business. I didn't really want to turn into a business because I was like, I don't want to build a studio or a business. And I enjoy teaching and coaching and things like that, but I didn't want it to become a career. But what shifted recently for me was going, yeah, there's all these other people, but my knowledge is valuable to somebody. So I'm just going to put it out there. And, if it helps somebody, great. If not, no big deal. And what really helped me change that was shifting from, when they say in business, they say, picture your ideal customer and then speak to them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was picturing the people I was coaching and, peers in that sense. And then my ego got involved and was like, well, what if they don't like it? And who are you? And all this other stuff. But then when I shifted it to like teenagers and young adults who were where I was in middle America going, I want to be an actor in Hollywood, and didn't have mentors or support or, anything like that. I said, I'm going to talk to them. So if nobody that's currently active as an actor professionally wants to listen to me or get anything from it, maybe there's some kids that are like, I'm interested in acting, and their parents are like, I don't know anything about that. Or, you can't be an actor, that's impossible or whatever, that I can share with them knowledge that'll hopefully give them the inspiration to either one, commit to it and figure out how to hopefully succeed. Or I should say that, to not face the challenges that I faced. Hopefully I can like give them the information and go, avoid this stuff so that you can enjoy your journey more. And you're still going to make mistakes and you're still going to have hard times, but hopefully you're not going to make the same mistakes I had. Or two, they discovered, yeah, this isn't really for, like, I'm not really that interested. Like the idea of acting is more interesting than actually the pursuit of it. So that's what this is. And, after you and I had a conversation the other day, which I thought was great and it was very relevant, I was like, I want to just record this because I think it would be great to share with people, because it was, if I find it beneficial for me, I want to share it. And because if it resonates with me, I know it's going to resonate with other people. And maybe they're ready for it now, and maybe they're going to be ready for it later. But the great thing about technology, one of the positive things is you can put it out there. It's out there for years. And, when somebody's ready for it, they, it's there waiting for them. So
it's evergreen. Yes. So,
yeah.
Yep, it sure is. Well, I mean, and what I was attempting to say earlier is that we're at a state of evolvement where we are really stepping into the power that we have to create our own reality. And that's really exciting. We can rewind several months ago, several years ago, and realize that we had certain spaces where we were blocked, where we're no longer blocked. And it's actually kind of getting fun to consciously create your own reality at this particular moment. And a lot of that has to do with being able to be successful at it, seeing the results, seeing something change, seeing something that you have the power to do. And all this time that we've been doing it and having sort of hit and miss luck with it, we've always known that we were going to get to a point where we're going to get really good at it. That's why we stayed with it. Something inside of us had us realize that we were going to do that. Here we are at this point where there's a lot more hits and a lot less misses. And we're going, okay, this stuff is really starting to expand and take effect. And to a certain degree, we're getting a great level of immunity to negative experiences that we don't have to experience, simply and only because of the power that we have inside of our inside of our consciousness that we have to create our own reality. And then we're also finding that we're manifesting positive events that almost look hopeless, just by virtue of the fact that we're doing it consciously. And that's super exciting to see that switch and that change happen.
Yeah, it's well, you say it's exciting, and it's all about perspective, because if you're not aware of, if you haven't been doing the work that you and I have been doing of, consciousness and law of attraction and spirituality in that sense, not to confuse that with religion or organized religion, but true spirituality, where it's like, the bigger, you or the higher self type thing, reconnecting with that, you can get caught up in what can be exciting to like you and I is detriment to a lot of other people, because we've been living in this society that determines its value based off of acquisition and materialistic things. And even for myself, as much work as I've done, you can't get around the human aspect, and as people say in the community is, you're not a human having a spiritual experience, you're a spirit having a human experience type thing. And, I get frustrated with that, but I'm like, no, that's the point, is to have those things come up by design. So it's interesting. And it is, because it's like we just, in California, just passed a mandate yesterday stating that, you have to have a vaccine to basically go in any public place. A lot of the studios and production companies are starting to mandate it. And not to get in that whole, to open that up to a discussion on whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. It's looking at society and looking at how things are shifting so much that you're having the world put these restrictions on. And for creatives, because I was thinking about this today, for creatives, it's interesting because I realized, I was in my meditation this morning, I realized that the problem that we have, or I should say, one of the problems that we have, let's say societally in America, primarily because we're so wealthy, is that we have too many options. And what hit me in my meditation today was the fact that when I was a kid, I didn't have that many options. Like, I didn't have the ability to go get in a car and drive someplace if I wanted to. I didn't have the ability to I didn't have money to just go buy things, go shopping. I didn't have the internet to just watch anything I wanted to. You'd have to go to Blockbuster, if anything, and rent a movie, which costs money. It was very restrictive. And so therefore I was happy to be in my bedroom creating, or maybe running around the neighborhood with, my friends and stuff like that. But I kind of had this flashback to when I was a kid and going, I never felt like I was missing out on anything, or going, I wish I had this. Now there was that when it was, when it came to some things, because my family didn't have a lot of money, and I heard a lot of, no, we can't afford that type stuff. But it wasn't like, now where it's like, I get so caught up in, like, I have so many ideas that I want to work on, like project wise or creatively, that it stalls me out. I call it the cereal aisle. Because if you go in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, it's just one full aisle that's 100 feet long of all different kinds of cereals. And there's so many choices that you get overwhelmed. You don't even make a choice. But if there was Cheerios and Oat Bran or something like that, you'd go, oh, Cheerios, And if you had a fear of missing out, you go, well, next week I'll come back. If I don't like this, I'll come back and get that. No big deal. But because we have so many choices now, and I say all that to circle back to this, is that I'm starting to shift my perspective on all these restrictions as a new alignment to that, taking away all this stuff, taking away all these choices to then only give me a few choices, which then allows me to focus and do what I came here to do, or really, use my creative. So that was something that interesting that came through for me today. And it goes back to what you were saying, is like, it's exciting, because to me, when I look at it from that perspective, it is exciting. But when I look at it from the other perspective of, whether it's lockdowns, I can't travel, or human rights and all this other stuff, I feel like this, and I feel like I'm losing, my ability, my freedom, and all this other stuff. But in actuality, it's saying, and this is one saying that, we hear a lot of, is what isn't meant for you will fall away. So when Netflix was like, I had to turn down a Netflix project, which I've been trying to work with, get a Netflix project for, since I moved to Los Angeles 12 years ago. And then of course it comes across and it goes, you must meet these requirements. And one was vaccination. And I turned it down. And right when I did that, this release happened of looking to them for substance, in the sense of, oh, I need them to create a project and then give me an opportunity. And I had this thing click in my head, and I was like, maybe all this is happening because you've been maybe, and I literally had this, it's kind of egotistical, but it's enlightening at the same time, of maybe all this is happening specifically for you, to get you to realize that you're just supposed to create your own path and stop relying on other people. And I was like, that was interesting. So to kind of wrap that up, it's basically, it is a perspective. And I know, and that's why I want to talk to you today, because so many people are, especially us creatives, are going through so much. And especially, and I talked to someone recently who was who said that they their kid who was an actor, who like discovered they want to be an actor, and wanted to start acting, and they jumped in and started acting and started booking work right away, plays and stuff like that. And then lockdown happened, and said that their kid's been very upset, depressed, and and like just this kind of depressed state. And I was like, well, and I'm talking to them, and I'm like, well, it's very simple. They had a creative outlet to express themselves, and it was shut off. But because they relied on other people or other sources to express themselves, it's the food supply has been cut off. But what's to keep them from still creating? And we get caught up in this idea that we're, and that's where the self-sustaining actor comes in, is that we give our power away to other people, to production companies, to money, to success and fame and all these other things. We give it away instead of just fulfilling just what do I want to express, and then figuring out resources to do that. So I wanted to talk to you today about, and I'm going to say this because this is one of my favorite quotes. There's a great film called Where'd You Go, Bernadette Peters. And there's a great quote in it by, or one of the characters played by Lawrence Fishburne, because she's like she's a architecture artist, and she ended up like her biggest dream project failed, and so she was criticized, so she walked away from it. She started a family, and the story picks up. she's got like a 12-year-old now, and then she's just being a housewife and everything, and she has a breakdown, and she ends up like running away, and she meets up with her old colleague who's played by Lawrence Fishburne, and she's telling him everything that's been going on, and he says to her, the artist that doesn't create becomes a menace to society, but the artist is but the true, I'm going to say this again, the artist that doesn't create becomes a menace to society, but the true artist is a menace to society. And like that just stuck out because I'm like, it's true. If we as artists are not creating, if we're not expressing ourselves, then we go into these sad, destructive, and we think we're not valuable. And when we put our source of nourishment in the hands of other people or other things, when those things are taken away, it's like, what do I do with myself? And that's why I really want to encourage people or educate them as much as I can and inspire them to just take matters into their own hands, so that if they go, hey, look, the industry shifts, and it's like, hey, like this happened to me when I moved to Los Angeles. They were looking for kind of like the asexual, I think is the word, like model-esque males, like the Twilight vampires type thing, and I was too rugged. And then things started to kind of shift back to where I started to get work, and then it was the whitewash conversation, and they're like, there's too many white people getting roles and we need minorities. And I fully support that. But it's like, when I'm reliant on that system that keeps changing consistently, it's very challenging. So whether it's things like that or what we're going through right now in the world with lockdowns and restrictions, everything, you and I were talking about this, and like how we can navigate, and tools that we can use to work through that and release and everything. And so one thing you said to me was, like, when you're triggered and how it narrows the light as opposed to wide. So I'd love for you to go into that and kind of explain that.
Well, great. Well, certainly, the conversation at that point was about really having full access to your creativity through your mind. And so when we are in a space, when we're in survival mode, then our bandwidth, the focus, is literally this narrow. And then when we find peace, even if we find it just because, that bandwidth opens up, and two things occur. One is that we have access to stream of conscious now that we didn't before, where there are ideas and solutions that we didn't have access to when we were in that narrow band of focus. But also we raise our vibration. And as a result of raising our vibration, we activate the creator within. And it's interesting because we're having what some people would assume is two different conversations, that of a conscious creator and that of a content creator. But they're actually not two different conversations whatsoever. You see, because the main event that's happening in our world right now is a conscious ascension. So you and I have had conversations for years about consciousness, but we were almost like closeted cuckoo club back then, right?
Yeah.
And so that was the trend. I love how you just give that great big grin when I said closeted, but it's
true, because I talk, not to cut, but I talk about that in one of my lessons, and I've said it all the time, that I was a closeted actor for a long time because of where I came from, and people judged me and criticized me. So I think we went through that. And that's why I love talking about this, because we, just as individuals, were closeted in so many different. I don't think closeted refers to just, the gay community. I think it's we hide our true self in closets all the time. So yeah.
Well, and there's a reason for that. Not only being a closeted creator, because of what people might say, oh, you need to go get that accountant degree or whatever. There's also being, there was a certain time where being a person who was working on developing your awareness and access to consciousness to consciously create your own reality, that was something that you couldn't talk to people about because you were crazy to think that there was ever such a thing as creating outside of a system, a practical, pragmatic system.
Or you're a witch and you get burned at the stake.
That kind of thing, yes.
Or you're Jesus Christ and they crucify you.
There's that kind of thing too.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that we have there's a very interesting correlation, because people who are creative, as in artists of any kind, and especially if you're familiar with Julia Cameron's work, with The Artist's Way, she actually merges the two lines of being an artist and being connected to consciousness. She calls it the great creator, which would be the universe, or the great creator of reality that we live in, and we're an extension of that, according to her work. And so, very often, of course, whatever we're doing, however we're expressing ourselves, is meant to be, or truly has the opportunity to be. Those lines end up being blurred, if non-existent, anyways, when you discover that as a creator, whether you're writing or acting, you're accessing a piece of yourself that is nonlinear. You're accessing a piece of yourself that is your consciousness, to access and create a character, or to access and create a world that characters live in and make them move around and do something with some agency, so that we can learn something from them. And they don't even exist, but we've created them. And when we did that, we accessed a nonlinear aspect of ourselves. So now, of course, what's happening is, and the main event that's happening isn't, the revealing of, say, corruption, or, the main event is not, being restricted because of a virus or something like that. The main event that's occurring right now is that the consciousness movement is taking the main stage of our purpose here on Earth, all of us. And we're meant to step into a greater reality, both personally and collectively. And that's the main event that's taking place. All these other things are a combination of a couple things. One, they're a healing, they're a purging of old limiting beliefs and paradigms going bye-bye. And they're also a way of actually getting us into a stage of being done with certain things that duality has a certain level of allure to it. And then, pretty soon when you play with matches, so to speak, in that sort of sense, so you get burnt. And then you're like, well, we don't want to play with duality that much anymore. So we're moving towards a more creative and more access to that. And they're one and the same in that sense. And I didn't realize that until I'm having this conversation with you. I find that a lot of people who have a drive to become an artist is really on a very, very high level conscious journey. And their drive to express themselves in that sense is actually a contribution to their conscious journey in a body.
I love you say that. I listen. There's a lecture that I listen to. It's a mixture of a bunch of lectures. I can't remember who the person is in it, but he says, like, he opens up, he goes, it's interesting that in the old Egyptian period of, during the Egyptian dynasties and everything, to be called a dreamer was the highest form of compliment. But now in our society, we live in a society where to be called a dreamer is the highest form of insult. And so I think, and I say I think this because this is how I personally feel about myself, is that a lot of the conflict I've dealt with, a lot of whether it be depression, sadness, frustration, the low points in my life have always come when I haven't been creating. And because I feel that artists, and that's not just actors, it's musicians, it's poets, it's it's even architects, it's people that do numbers. Like everybody, I feel like everybody's an artist in different forms of fashions, but a true artist, and that's not somebody who's successful or even great at at being an artist, but somebody who's just a true artist that expresses themselves, and they don't. And that's where I love that quote about becoming a menace to society. Is that's where a lot of our depression and everything comes from, is from not expressing ourselves. So let me ask you this, because everything you said was great, but how do we tap into that? Like when we're triggered, like we talk about, and you go, well, it's like this, and you want to be here. Like, what are some things people can do to reconnect?
Lifelines.
What's that?
Some lifelines to stay aligned.
Or to get back, even if not to stay aligned, but if you're out of alignment, or, whatever, because the one thing we're battling, our higher self, our spirit, the person, the thing that wants to create, is battling the human mind and ego and programming. That's all societal programming that's going, oh, that's impossible. You'll never make money that way. You're not special, and all these other things. So when that kicks in and we go down that, which I've caught myself doing that, of going in that fight or flight mode, how do we get out of that fight or flight of trying to figure out how to physically go out and make it happen, which we've been taught, if you want something to happen, you got to work hard.
Well, first of all, there is an amazing sense of guidance that we have within, and I call it our innate GPS. So as you know, I teach intuitive development. I teach people how to use tarot cards, to talk to their angels and guides, to access their intuition inside. But it's not about the tarot cards, and it's not about the angels necessarily. It's about a part of us that is all-knowing. Now, one of the things I'm going to merge with that I think is very important is that the human narrative, for whatever reason, not bad, not good, took a journey into systemizing a pyramid system of power. And everything is centralized, and it's a power structure based on a pyramid where there's certain people, we would call them the elite, at the top, and everything's down below. And so as a result of that, of the appearance of that pyramid, was the survival, or the, it was made cool to become sort of a subject, or because ultimately that's being exploited in a sort of a sense.
Yeah.
People could call it slavery or whatever of some sort, even if it's just to paper, like money. Servitude, but it's all of the above. Yeah. To have that pyramid, to have the pyramid structure, and to be required to be submissive to it. And so for years and years, I remember hearing my grandparents' stories, because they lived in the Depression, and the Depression actually just made them better servants. Oh, got to give to that company, got to give to this. Right. It wasn't about creating something on your own. So humanity took a journey into that, and as a result of that, lost the memory of the power that it has to stay aligned, or become connected. So what happens when we get into that, like you mentioned, is that we have become programmed to believe that the only place that we can draw from what we need or want is that system, the part of that system. And what we're learning now during this great awakening is that we are sovereign beings, and we create whatever we want outside of that system. And that will become more and more. And that will be directly related to our ability to be in alignment. Now, when I teach people about alignment, especially I do hypnotherapy. So part of the hypnotherapy is actually dividing what's inside of our head into two minds, let's say. One is, let's say, the left brain, and that's the part that's programmed. And the other is the right brain, and that's what we would call being connected to our heart, which is a portal to our higher self, or our all-knowing self. So the practice really becomes about using our left brain, or our linear mind, less, sometimes, if not at all. We've also been programmed or taught to be submissive to that system, that that everything that we need, we have to get through a process of doing. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's sometimes that actions need to be taken, but sometimes it's not about a matter of just taking actions, because that's part of actually being, part of that system or part of a slave to that system. And we are, we're in that mindset. And so what happens when we learn our sovereignty through alignment is that we become more and more free. And it may actually start to play itself out like, suddenly someone asks us to do something and they pay us or whatever, but there's a lot of different ways that it will come in of its own accord. So to stay in alignment, the number one practice to actually gain that alignment is to actually make the left brain more of a servant to the right. Because what happens when we're out of alignment is that the left brain has taken a dominant position. And the left brain's not capable of doing what the right brain can. The right brain can literally create miracles. It can literally create miracles. And I could tell you a couple of them and how they come to be. And then you can sort of like dissect them like the frog in sixth grade. And then you can realize that we have such easy access to creating amazing things in our reality. And so what happens is literally just it sort of contradicts that programming, but where we suspend the left brain and we take that leap of faith of trusting the right and trusting that we're always in the right place at the right time. Sometimes there's nothing as powerful and exciting as being in an enchanted space where your heart is wide open right now, not because it was stimulated by anything. You didn't just get your new Ferrari or something like that. It literally is just the joy of living. And when you're in the joy of living, you're in alignment. And what alignment ultimately means is that you're in a very aware partnership with your most powerful self, your higher self, your consciousness.
Right.
And so when I do hypnosis, for example, and I program people for success, when I program people for success, what I actually do, the first place I take them to is I have them remember, and this is an exercise that I do regularly to make this happen. The first thing I do is I ask someone to remember your ultimate favorite memory. And when we recall that, it could be the day we won the sixth grade spelling bee. It could be the day that our grandpa took us to Disneyland for the first time and we just had the biggest blast. I mean, I remember when I was in real estate, taking a $30,000 check to the bank, which was a nice check to take to the bank. But there's all kinds of different high points that we have in life. And when we actually recall one of those high points, one of the first things that happen is that we feel this melting feeling in our body and in our being as positive energy the positive energy that's already effervescently flowing in our being, we place our awareness on it. And anything that causes us tension in the way of limitations, distorted thoughts, begin to melt off of us. And we begin to be in a space just by remembering that moment. And then I coach the person to realize that by getting into that space, you aren't just reliving a memory, you've actually rejoined in alignment just by feeling that way. It's the portal to there. So if you want to remember the day that you got married or the day that you gave birth to your kid and that ultimate feeling, when we go back to describe that feeling, it's very interesting because the feeling is omnipotence. The feeling that we have is our God self, our divine self. The feeling that we have in those moments had nothing to do with the spelling bee, the $30,000 check, or the day with Grandpa at Disneyland, is that during those moments, we were ultimately connected to our divine self. And the cool thing is that just remembering or getting into that feeling space, we go back into that connectivity. And we don't need the new Ferrari to get there. That's power.
So just to kind of clarify, you're saying like, I'm triggered, whatever, I lost my job, or, whatever it is, how am I going to pay my bills? I'm triggered. I'm in that fight or flight mode. And you're saying to stop and think of maybe even close my eyes and think of one of my favorite moments in my life, and kind of re-experience that, like we do throughout the day anyways. We're constantly going forward and backward in time, but so go back and allow to relive that. And by switching that, the endorphins of the brain and just the spiritual connection, I'm getting back into alignment with my higher self, and I'm getting like the fulfillment that I'm like the true fulfillment, as opposed to the materialistic.
True.
To get to switch from that left to the right brain. Is that what you're?
Oh, absolutely.
That made sense.
Yes. Well, so it does, and it does, and it does. And let me tell you why it does 3 or more times. So first of all, in those moments, there's already a plan for our life, and that's a plan that we created. So when we have a devastating moment, like losing our job or whatever, anything like that, it's a moment where we have actually made a switch in course. It's, we tend to look at the disjointed moment that we're a part of, and we don't see what that's bringing in. But when we look at the past, we see that every time we hit one of those challenging points, and that's where we have that saying that where one door closes, a new door opens, and they're all synchronized, those doors. So every door is a closing door, and another door is an open door. So what happens in that moment, of course, when we're triggered into that narrow bandwidth of vision, which is, oh my gosh, and literally it kind of can translate to this: that job was my only avenue to sustain myself, which is where we sort of get, because in the last, 9 months or 5 years, that job has been my sustenance.
You're right.
I don't know anything else but that job. And it can apply to any sort of challenging change or shift that happens.
Relationship.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yes. So what happens in that moment is that we get to say, okay, look, if this is one door closing, it's another door opening. But literally, by going into that space of expansiveness, then what happens is that we open this up again. And you'll find that, like, let's say if we go back to that job example, you lose a job and you can get like, oh my God, that was my sustenance. How am I going to pay the rent? And then you open up and you already start to feel good anyways, which is the only thing we really want, because you feel connected. And you feel connected to your divine self. And then in this space, you go, you know what? I actually didn't like that job anyways. I actually had bigger visions and dreams. So how am I going to leverage this, whatever that might be? So, but what happens is that when we're in that space of loss, or when we're in that narrow band of focus, we can't see the possibilities. We can't see the door that's about to open. It's still about to open.
Yeah.
But we get to make that crossing a little bit more peacefully, and we start to get ideas of how we can take our power back and go to the next step.
Yeah. You said, I wrote this out. You said, when you're triggered and in a deflated state of consciousness, you have a narrow vision, I have to do mode. So you limit your opportunities because it limits what you can see, the ability to attract the solution. So you said that when we talked, I wrote it down.
Exactly. Let me tell you a cool story about that, because this is really going to actually, make the rubber meet the road for anyone who's listening to this, and realize, and maybe even have a couple ahas about how to apply this and get some goodness. So, I used to work for BMW selling cars, and they used to, where you made the most money selling cars is when you hit certain bonuses. And that was, where it happened. Now it's interesting because I wanted to go to Brazil to meet someone. And what happened was I was really working hard to make my 10-car bonus, which was a $1,500 bonus. And with that bonus, I was going to take this trip to Brazil to meet someone. And it was the last day of the month. This is all a very true story. It was the last day of the month, and I was at 9.5 cars. So We don't cut cars in half and sell
I
them.
was about to say, everybody's going to be like, so
I'll just take the front part
half
because
a
it has
car?
the engine and the steering wheel and the satellite radio, right?
Yeah.
So no, so it just means, you split a deal because sometimes you just split with something else or whatever. Yeah. So
That makes sense.
yeah. So there's a lot of that happens. So some customer comes in and then they leave and then they come back in. And so because the other person logged them in,
Yeah.
half the deal. So anyways, I was a half a car short and I started to feel that tension of feeling like it was me against the world. Like, how am I going to make this happen? And I decided to take a little break, and because I had already been practicing with alignment, and I'm like, I'm going to go into that space that I teach my clients I do readings and hypnosis for. I'm going to go into that space of expansiveness because I recognized that I had gone into this constricted space, this powerless space of being in my head and not being in here. And when I took the break, I went next door, I got an iced tea, and they said, you know what, Source, you've been amazing to me because I am really blessed right now. It actually doesn't even matter if I get that $1,500 or not. If I want to take that to Brazil, if I want to take that trip to Brazil, I can take that trip to Brazil. And you know what? I don't need that $1,500 because as I see that $1,500 as being something separate from me that I do not have, then it's impossible for me to bring it into my awareness or to realize it into part of my reality. Because if I do that, I'm segmenting it off and creating a force field between me and it. And there's no way that it can come anyways. I said, you know what? You can send me that $1,500 in any way you want. I know that you can, and I know that you will. So I just let this go. And of course, I had plans to see a friend of mine. You and I are both Sagittarius, so we know how fun-loving the Sages are. I have a fun Sagittarius friend who we do nothing but laugh, and I had plans to have dinner. Now, typically in that environment, which would represent any sort of, cubicalistic work a day kind of environment, it would be the mindset. Well, if you're half a car short, you might as well stay late to the closing bell so you get another one in.
Right.
And what value does that have in exchange for?
Well, you diminish your own value because you're not valuing your own time. You're going, this job is more important than me and my personal life and everything.
And who makes all the money from that? It's not me.
Correct.
So anyways, that was not a fair exchange to me, even for the $1,500 bonus. To me, it was worth more to get to spend, this evening with my friend and get to laugh all night. So anyways, the minute that I let go, literally the minute that I let go, and I went through all of that reasoning in my awareness. And I use the word awareness because it's not mind. So again, when we switch up the left and right, that's what we're left with. What is this? What is this that I'm? Is this coming from my awareness, or is it's coming from my mind?
Yeah.
So what happens?
Let me ask you this, because I don't, in all the things I listen to, it just popped in my head. People never ask this question. When you said the moment I let go, and I hear this all the time, like, you just got to let go. And what we do is we go, okay, I'm letting go. And yet we're still looking, okay, I let go God, or I let go universe. Where's it at? When you feel the letting go, what does it feel like to you? Knowing that it's different for everybody, but what does a true release?
Right. And so, and that was, and remember in this case, what I did was I really let go. I was no longer invested in the $1,500 bonus that came from work. I was literally only invested in going, and I literally let go of the entire bonus. And what did that feel like to you to let go? When I let go of the need of it, I realized I could get it from anywhere and that I didn't need to be tethered to it. Now, I will tell you that within 3 minutes, and I counted them 3 backward, I got a text from one of my colleagues asking me to do a Bluetooth pairing on a phone that he would put me on half the deal. And the let go was literally a let go. And actually, I just designed a set of tarot cards. And there's one card, it's the 8 of Cups, and it's the surrender and release card. And it's the most powerful thing that we can create, because the suit of cups is all about flow, energy, and creativity, and love, energy, emotion. They're all wrapped up in one life force. And one of the most powerful creativity acts that we can do is surrender and release.
Mm.
And so the interesting part of this, again, like I said, literally, as I was making it, and the reason I say I counted the minutes is because I got a receipt for the iced tea, and I compared the time on the text with the time on the receipt, because that's about the time that I had finished releasing it. It was 3 minutes apart. And I got the text that said, would you Bluetooth connect a customer's car, and I'll put you on half the deal? And I said, sure. That meant I was on my way. Now, if it ended there, that would be great. But what happened was I left the dealership on time I had two choices. Either I could have stayed there late or not. I left to go meet my friend. And as I opened the path, the driver's door, I was like, oh, there's a couple dollars on the ground. I saw the green. And so I picked it up, and right away I clued in, and I said, you let go of your need for money.
Mm-hmm.
You let go of your need for money. And when you let go of your need for money, or the fear around money you don't have, now you're a magnet for it. And I knew that's what it was. So I picked it up and I thought, okay, that's cute. $2. Thank you, universe. And I open it up. It's not $2, it's $285. And I still have a picture of that.
Nice.
I laid it out on the seat, on the red seat of my car. It's like a red seat and green money right there. And if the story ended there, that would still even be good, because I got it. So of course I went with my Sagittarius laughter friend, and we sat there, and of course I paid for dinner. And the first thing that we did is that we started to laugh about finding that money. And we were laughing and laughing. And I told her about letting go and about manifesting that half a car within 3 minutes. And of course, we were laughing and laughing and laughing. So guess what we were doing? We were fueling creativity around money. And so while I'm sitting there, I got a call from a casting that I got a part or a role to go do on Monday. Well, I show up at set on Monday, and this is like this goes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I got a role, and I was supposed to be there on Monday. I get there on Monday. I'm standing at wardrobe, and the next thing that happens is that I'm having this conversation with this beautiful human being that had just got back from a silent retreat in Tibet, or in that area. It was like a yoga retreat or a silent yoga retreat. So we're kind of talking like this. And the next thing you know, the person in front of her and the person behind me are all interested in the same topic. And we end up realizing that out of everybody on set, how we were perfect aligned, and we saw it as a form of abundance. So I then went, and I was on set. And about halfway through the day, I got an email from a production company for whom I had done a commercial 3 years prior when I was non-union. It still had a perpetuity clause to it. And on that Monday, I got an email stating that they wanted to renew the perpetuity of that commercial. And the buyout was $1,500. Remember when I said that the universe, or that source, could send me $1,500 in any way that it wanted? Now, it was, in essence, though, it wasn't just about $1,500 plus the 15 plus the 285 on the ground plus the fee, the money I made to go on set or whatever. I mean, that's great in and of itself. But it also gave my awareness license to kick in anytime I can't see the way, because there's no way possible that I saw that I was going to get an email from production sending me $1,500 3 days after I told the universe, the source, that it had any way that it wanted at its disposal, but it decided to send it to me not once, but twice. And then from now on, anytime I end up in one of those situations, instead of going into need and into that narrow bandwidth, I actually expand and get back into alignment and say, okay, that's okay. Source, you have any way at your disposal to lead me to the solution. And since then, ever since then, everything I do is like that. And it's miracle after miracle after miracle.
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember you telling me that story a few years ago. It reminds me somebody else I study, Kyle Cease. I think you and I talked about, but he talks about. I mean, everybody's saying the same thing. We're just saying it differently. But I love what he says is when you're in that fight or flight mode, like you talk about that narrow light, you can only see what you'll lose. You can't see what you'll gain.
Mm.
And it's true because we're looking at, oh, it took me 6 months to acquire this thing that I'm losing. If I want it again, it takes me another 6 months. And that's what we're talking about, is getting away from that elbow grease mentality. Like I have to work for it, as opposed to, and, Reverend Beckwith says, alignment before action, like align with it first and then take the step. Because a lot of people go, oh, all I have to do is think about it and sit on the couch. And it's like, no, you do have to take physical action, but you don't take action before you align with it. Because if you don't believe you deserve money, or that there's miracles or, or opportunities around you, then no matter how hard you work, you're not going to see them because you don't believe they exist. And so, I'm sure that money, somebody stepped over that money. Five or six people might have stepped over that money that you saw because you were open to it.
Well, there is that, and ultimately, and here's what this comes down to, is that throughout the day, we float in and out of the knowing that we are connected to a very powerful version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's where we go in and out of lack and scarcity and survival versus I got this. And so when you're talking about alignment and taking action, absolutely, there may be something that's asked of you. Nobody says that we get to meditate the Ferrari. I mean, we may be able to do that at some point. I believe that we do have the power to do that. I don't know that we would want a gas guzzler when we get there, but to that level of consciousness. But maybe an electric one, but whatever, 0 point energy with the Tesla coil in it, whatever. But my point is that the discussion isn't about what we do, or isn't about whether we do something in terms of action. It's about what we do. And when we ignite that alignment, we're also connected, because we're connected to the most powerful version of ourselves. It's like GPS satellite following us around and sending little signals. Go do this, go do that, go do this, go do that. It's very interesting. I will tell you that over this weekend, so also, again, going back to the tarot cards that I designed, the suit of wands deals with this. It's such a great, to use the allegories. The suit of wands deals with action, right? The suit of wands deals with the action that you take. And the eight of wands is about getting signs to act, getting the sign to take this action or take that action, take this action. Yeah. And when I designed this, I have the angel reference in there, but I also have these cloud-shaped musical notes. And there's a reason for that, because sometimes we'll see something in the clouds that say, oh, that's a sign.
Right.
It might not just be the clouds. It might be the license plate in front of us.
Yeah.
We might be thinking about taking a trip to the United Kingdom, and we're, walking through the Trader Joe's, and someone walks past us twice with something that says United Kingdom, or
right.
the flag on it, or whatever.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways that we have that alignment, right? But what's interesting is that when we are in alignment, those synchronicities and those signs are off the chart.
Right.
So
undeniable.
Right. So what happens is we're eternally connected to the most powerful aspect of ourselves, but we float in and out several times a day of actually remembering it. And it requires remembering it to be able to access it. Because when we're stuck and in that narrow band of focus, then we're just this little meat suit that is,
right.
War of the Worlds here. And we're, our power is being given to a green piece of paper that just came off of a printing press.
right,
or whatever it might be,
instead of ourselves.
Instead of ourselves, realizing that
Yeah.
there's something way more holographic going on. And then when we connect with that higher version of ourselves, we're always connected to it. But in order to be in this experience, we will float in and out of that. And so it's just an instant memory. And the A Course in Miracles, which is something I did years and years, it's called the Holy Instant. And it's literally the memory that we're eternally connected to the source of life. And when we get there, we're like, there's no such thing as having a problem. So that's what the 23rd Psalm is all about. Is it the 23rd Psalm? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I mean, I don't know, but
I forgot that stuff long ago.
But if you look at what that's saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me to, and basically that's a version of saying, like, I'm eternally connected to the source of life. There's absolutely nothing that I could possibly lack either. And either, using the reference again, we're either connected to it or we're disconnected.
And, you know, it's interesting because I just was visiting my nieces a couple of weeks ago, and they're 5 and 6 years old. But, you know, I've been witnessing them grow up, and from an adult and doing all this work, watching them, we're born into this life. Just like my nieces don't worry about money. They don't worry about food. They don't worry about this thing that's going on in the world. They don't worry about nuclear weapons or whatever. We come into the world just naturally. And I've watched you know, not to critique my family, but of course they bring their own stuff to parenting and, you know, things like that. And we've had conversations about it, but I see this where, like, the younger one, we were getting ready to leave someplace, and I looked down and she's got 2 different pair of shoes on each foot. And I go, hey, do you know that you're wearing 2 different shoes? And my sister goes, yeah, she does that. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, she walking out into the world, she's like, this is who I am. But I saw myself questioning that. And it wasn't, you know, but I could see how, and then my dad later, he's like, what are you doing with 2 different shoes on? And it's just this whole thing of like, you start to see how societally and everything else, you start taking this big bean that comes in like this massive, you know, all-inclusive thing. And we start chiseling it away to go, you're not good enough. Stop acting weird. Stop doing these things. And that's why we're in this place now where we don't, as adults, live in that connection more throughout the day than we do the disconnection.
Well, and we're getting better at it, which is where we're getting our power back.
I mean, we're having this conversation.
Yeah, so of course we are. And we've had these discoveries. We've had also some real life experiences that just go, wow, it's great to be alive. I mean, I went and did an energy healing session this last weekend, and right away, you know, the synchronicities, like I was like, oh yeah, that's what it's like to be fully aligned.
Right.
What I think about, you know, when you're talking about that, with the kids, because they're like a culture sample in a petri dish, right? Because when they're with their parents, you know, who restrict them and who give them boundaries and parameters, then they start to kind of like get into that space. Yeah. Like, say, with the kids, they really do create an example of what it's like, of who we truly are, which is being connected, right? And then you take someone like us, who's like maybe the fun uncle, and they're very, very different around us. Yeah. As I have one niece, and every time she's around me, she's angelic. She's angelic. And I said to a couple of my sisters, I said, oh my gosh, Presley's just an angel. And they look at me like, what?
Yeah, come live with her.
And so apparently, you know, she tells off her mom all the time and all that kind of stuff. But the different thing is, it's the same being, but she's in a different, she's with somebody who constantly restricts her and is constantly on her back, versus with me, I just like let her be who she is. I was wearing this, I have these crystals, and I was wearing them. She asked me what they were, and I tried explaining to her. She goes, oh, just a minute. So she went into her room and she brought out all these crystals. She says, this one's for good energy. Yeah. This one's for that, or whatever. And so, you get to this place, like all of a sudden you can speak their language, and that language is the language of connectivity. But the same can be true for us. And that's why it's so important for us to have these conversations. I don't allow myself to participate deeply in conversations about the challenges that the world is currently facing, because that's not the main event.
Right.
But I will create and participate in conversations that are about the main event, which is the rapid expansion of consciousness collectively. Because 2 years ago, there were quote unquote normal people that didn't have time to invest in their conscious journey, and now all of a sudden it's their first priority.
Well, and I think that's important because, I mean, most of the people who are going to see this are actors or creators, and it's like, I encourage everyone to stop. If you're doing it, like, I shouldn't say to stop, but to think about, number one, just creating, whether you don't know what you're doing or you do, you have experience, like whatever, but realizing that you can create something that can be part of that conversation and change the world, and things like that, there's so much bad stuff. And I tell people this all the time when I'm like, put your stuff on Instagram and Facebook and things like that. And they're like, oh, I don't want to get, all these other people that are posting all these, half naked photos and things like that. And I'm like, the only reason, I shouldn't say the only, but one of the major reasons that these people exist is because people like you and I and other people who have a higher consciousness and have something of value to say don't say it. And so, and the rest of the human race or audience is looking for knowledge or guidance or even just entertainment. And so they're like, okay, well, this is the best thing out there. And so they watch this thing and they go, why are these people keep getting famous and rich and everything? It's like, because you won't put yourself out there, and you won't say what you have to say because you're afraid of what people will judge you or people think of you. It's like the interesting thing about people like that just, in my opinion, don't really offer much. It's very surface. I should say it's very surface level. The one thing that I do that they have that the other people don't is that they don't care what other people think. They're putting it out there. They're just like, I'm putting it out there. And so we need more creators who have something to say, no matter if the world understands it yet or not, but have something to say and put it out there and risk people making fun of or criticize. I mean, they criticize. You think about the first person who came up with the idea that the earth was round, when everybody in the world thought it, believed it was flat. And I'm not going to get into a whole discussion about these flat earthers that have come back up, but that person was called crazy, and anybody like him was called crazy until they discovered the world was round. And it's like, in overnight, like, who's the crazy one? And so you have to, in my opinion, and that's where, like, when the creators don't create, they become a menace to society, is that hopefully in us having this conversation and talking to actors and things like that, it'll give them the permission to give themselves permission to create and be a part of this new world, this new society, this new consciousness that's coming along, and go, okay, the way we've been doing it, it served us up until now. And look, I can create and still do what I love as a creator, as an actor, director, writer, producer, whatever it is, but be a part of the evolvement as opposed to just the cash grab or the famous grab, or, whatever it is that was the materialistic, like you said, the Ferrari, which goes, look, if you want a Ferrari, if you want to be rich, if you want to be famous and everything, that's cool. If you're honest with yourself, why you want that. But when you really reach a consciousness, like you're talking about, of releasing, your identity isn't tied up to it. So you go, hey, look, I picked up the money and found $280. But if somebody came right along and grabbed it out of your hands, you'd go, Well, at least I got to experience it for a minute, but that money when you had you didn't change when the money was in your hand, and when it's taken away, you're still the same person, and the value is in you. And especially for creators, you have so much more value than the world gives you credit for, each and every one of us. And some other people, like, we have so much value because we can create up here, and the next step is to put it out into the world. And I don't know if one person sees this, you and I talk, and it inspires them, like, that's good enough for me. It doesn't need to be millions of people.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is and I think of the analogy of the tomato. Now, I wasn't there, but allegedly for years and years, people thought that tomatoes were poisonous. But can you imagine our world with not eating tomatoes now?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that we've come upon a time of our evolution where the world needs visionaries. The world needs people who can see beyond what's been taught, what's been shown, or what's been propagated.
Yeah.
And so, there is a time, if we back up before 2 years ago, where it might have been something that someone could afford to hide as a visionary.
Uh-huh.
And I am a visionary. Like you're a visionary. Like we're a visionary. One of the things that I've noticed, and it's not a blanket policy for everyone, but the entertainment industry attracts a lot of people who are on a very high level conscious journey of discovery. And so the drive to be an actor or a writer or both, or a creator or whatever, is again actually a drive to discover their own creativity, and that's a tool of which. And it's interesting because when you put it that way, then all of a sudden it begins to be something completely different. I've noticed that, like a lot of actors per se that I've worked with or that I've met along the way, there's a lot of them that they're doing work where they put their actual physical being into service,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a distorted relationship with their looks or their being or whatever, contradictory to what it may have
Yeah.
what they say. And they're on a journey of finding self-value.
Yeah.
That's why they have that distortion. And so it's an opportunity there. So what's interesting again is that the world needs all of those visionaries right now. And so now it's going to be an amazing draw to see all of the visionaries come out and to see what they have to offer, as again, humanity is going through a very interesting transformation. We're, in essence, among many things, we're going to be leaving that pyramid structure behind, the pyramid structure of power.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also going to decentralize things like money and resources of the planet. We're eventually going to be doing that so that they can be more equally distributed to who they belong to. And there's going to be a lot of those kinds of changes, which are going to lead a lot of opportunities for visionaries to be able to see something that hasn't been done or seen before, and to actually plant the seed for the rest of us to be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. Yeah. So I want to say this before I forget, because you were talking earlier about, there's another, when one door closes, another opens. I've heard that for years and it never really clicked for me. Like, cause I was just like, no, it feels like the door just got slammed in my face. And another perspective of saying that, that's helped me recently. And when I remind myself of it, it's really helped me, which is, the things that aren't meant for me are falling away. And so I say that because, we get so attached to these things, especially, I'm 12 years into Hollywood, 20 years into this career. And like, I can't really even do all the momentum I've built up has just been shut down, and I, part of me has been wanting to sit there and be the victim and everything. And then, as I said earlier about looking at it from a different perspective, going, maybe, this is the way I'm supposed to be doing it. Like, whether you want to call it God, the universe, however you identify, or, just yourself. In my belief is that all these things are happening. And if something's being taken away from you, as painful as it is, and I'm not saying it's not painful, believe me, it's painful because it's a loss. It's like losing a loved one, because we've identified so closely to it, is that it's pushing us to our greatness, to not only be our best version of ourselves, but to have everything that we want, money and success and all these other things. But the cool thing is that when we let go of that, we don't identify with the success. We don't identify with the money. We're like, yeah, I'll take the money, I'll take the success, and I'll take these things. But if they're all taken away, I'm okay with that too. Because again, another Kyle Cease thing that really helped me was when you stop identifying as the apple and you start identifying as the apple tree. You're the one that creates the apples. And it's like, if somebody eats the apple, great. If not, no big deal. But it's the idea that, when these things are being taken away from me, things that I've been working for, like the Netflix thing, or, other things where it's like being taken away from me, I'm not actually losing anything. The way it's actually, if I am losing something, the weight that's holding me back from my greatness. And it's, if anything, it's like I said earlier in this, is like the cereal aisle is being taken down from hundreds of options down to just a couple. And out of those two, I can't lose. And it's actually going to be, and what was I going to say? I had this epiphany about it. Oh, because you were talking about this, about like, again, in the society, the upbringing that I was brought up in, lower middle class, or I don't even know how that's, but like blue collar and everything else, it was like, go make it happen, tighten your shoelaces, go do it. And that served us as a society for many years. So it's not a bad thing. It got us to where we are. But what I realized, and it hit me when I was thinking about this, what's not meant for me is falling away. Is I thought I went back, and I think it was in a meditation. I thought back to quite a few instances in my life where I wanted something, and I couldn't have it. And I remember one specifically. It was a relationship. I fell head over heels for a girl, and couldn't be with her, and for whatever reason, and I was just like, and I remember thinking like, why can't I just be happy and everything else? And then some years down the line, we reconnected, and we did end up dating, and it turned out it didn't go well. And
kind of guess
that's been some years ago, but it didn't even hit me until just a couple of days ago that I was like, oh my God, like, even though like I believed that I was really supposed to be with it, because all this chemical reaction, I was supposed to be with this person because I felt in love with them and whatever. But the universe was going, that's not for you, and I'm going to take that away. But because I came from a place of, I can acquire whatever I want by physical attainment, when the option came around again later, I was like, oh, I'm going to grab this thing and squeeze the hell out of it. Like a kid grabs, loves a bunny so much that they squeeze the life out of it. And it hit me right then that like the universe was trying to keep me from experiencing that lower vibration, bad relationship. And I worked my way into it to no, I'm going to have it. And that's having that, stepping back and look at that. I was like, oh my God, that's what it looks like. So what I've been doing since then is, when like people have like canceled on me, just this week, people have canceled on me, or moved this or moved that, or, I forgot my keys someplace and I had to drive all the way back across town. The old me that wants to come up and get frustrated and go, oh my God, and, throw up the hands and, why is, Mercury retrograde, why is things suck and everything else? And I was just like, oh, it's not meant for me. And doing that has, number one, kept my stress level down. But number two is just like made me realize, like, just because I think I want it and I feel like I want it doesn't mean that that's what's going to best serve me. And like you talked about earlier, like the signs are everywhere, like the person wearing the shirt. If the universe or God or whatever you want to call it is like, hey, I know you want this, but I'm going to take, because you don't even know what this entails. The more I listen to that, the more I start getting into alignment and things are showing up that are actually for me, that, like you said earlier, is like, oh man, I never even thought of it like that. I even considered that was an option. And to kind of wrap this all up, like it really comes like the biggest thing, because intellectually people are going, yeah, I get that. But it's really the trust fall. And the way I assimilate it is like when I went skydiving, or if anybody's been skydiving, you get up to that doorway, looking out at the open air, ready to take this leap. Your body's telling you, hold on, get back in the plane. Like, it's coming up. Oh, the parachute won't open. Who is this person on my back? And is this thing safe or whatever else? But the trust, the faith, if you're a religious person, the faith comes in being scared, but still stepping out, because the scaredness is just the primal brain trying to stay alive, or the ego trying to survive. And what it doesn't want you to do is step out of that airplane and prove it wrong, because then it can't exist. But it's stepping out of that airplane every day and going, I know it's scary and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm going to keep, because what I'm doing right now isn't working. And clearly for the whole world, what we've been doing isn't working. And that's why it's falling apart. And it looks like the elites are taking it away, but even they don't have as at control of it the way that we think they do and the way that they think they do. But like you said, this conscious shift and everything, and I'll share this with you. I want your thoughts on this, because this kind of hit me in meditation too the other day, because I was thinking about talking to my older niece. And I don't, what, for whatever reason, but in the meditation, she was like, well, like, what's the key to enjoying life? And I watched them when I was visiting them. I was watching them, and they have so much. They have so much because the way we were brought up, and we were always being told, no, we can't afford it. And my sister has built a very good life for her and her family. And she provides for them so much so that I'm like, oh my God, they're not going to value what it takes to actually earn something. They're just, which there's, that's a whole nother discussion. But I noticed, and this is where this came from, was noticing that when you told them, no, we're not going to get that thing, they'd be like, they're so used to getting it, just asking for it, and it shows up. And so this is where this came from. And I realized the phrase that came up was, the key to enjoying life is to be okay with not getting what you want. And because I realized if you're okay with not getting what you want, then you're not attached to anything. And then you're not a slave to anything. And then you're just in the flow, because you're like, I want to experience this thing. And it's like, and then you don't get it and going, all right, no big deal. That's cool too. Like you said with the money, like, you know what, give it to me however you want, or don't. Like, I'm going on about my day. I'm going to dinner with my friend. And so I realized, when I'm going to say this to my niece, is like, you can enjoy life by being okay, by going, hey, look, I want this thing. If I don't get it, fine. And because I realize a lot of my own suffering comes from me wanting something, then not getting it, and then going, why can't I have it? Why can't I be happy? Why does everybody else win, and things like that? So I don't know, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, so first of all, it's interesting because as you're saying this, I've been holding something to present, and it's perfect for this.
You're welcome.
Or yeah. First of all, one of the things that when I speak about the $285 on the ground, one of the things that I say, people say, "Oh, somebody dropped that," and I say, "No, I don't know." First of all, by actually going a level deeper and realizing, not believing, realizing that this world is capable of way more than we limit it to happen, that $285 could have just combusted on there. And if someone is still in a level of practicality where they can't accept that yet, then they're still a part of the journey. But there are people now who are at the level where they can accept that this world is capable of so much more. By removing that level of limitations on the world to provide the experiences that we can accept and receive, then we give it a lot more power to do a lot more things. And so when I had that and people asked me, I wonder who dropped that money, and I just said, nobody. It was there already.
The universe dropped it for me.
The universe dropped it there for me. When, because I work with the angels, people always mention, and myself included, all of a sudden there'll be no bird in the sky, and then you'll see a feather just
oh yeah, that's funny.
Start to fall. I mean, that's where you get the idea that the world is capable. And if you really want to move into a place of power, give the world permission, or in other words, free it up by not having the limitations in your mind. And the second is this, well, first of all, before I share this experience with you, I do believe that there's going to be a version 2.0 of the entertainment industry. And it's going to be one that tells stories that are meant to expand instead of contract consciousness. So if you look at what Hollywood produces, it does seem to have a goal of contracting consciousness. There are certain things where people of expanded consciousness can get an expanded message out of what's produced, but its overall mission does appear to have that sort of numbing people down kind of a thing. And there's going to be a new version.
Yeah. My rebuttal to that would be, I agree, especially in the media aspect of it, and a lot of reality TV, not all, because there's some good reality TV in the sense of like documentaries, series, and things like that. But I'll say that I agree with you, but I also don't fully believe that it's 100% purposeful. I think it's because of the lower consciousness of the people. That's just the byproduct. And by all of us leveling up by osmosis, so will.
Yeah, I'm not attached to whether it's intentional or not. I just know that it's the end result, and that's what's actually coming out. So There's a lot less The Notebook coming out, and a lot more the evil around the corner kind of a thing. So there is a bit of that. So there is a reboot, a 2.0 that will happen, that will have us working, but to do things that we're really, that our heart is into, for sure. And a lot of us are pivoting with our creativity in other directions, which is great. And then when 2.0 comes back up, we'll be ready to go back to work, still in the flow of creativity.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was going to share with you, an experience where I learned something really valuable, is that, in between when I lost the real estate job and my house and such, and when I rediscovered this new path, I was in, some people, they call it the dark night of the soul. And then you're kind of in this stage. It's kind of like being in the desert where the old is gone, but the new hasn't shown up yet. But you're in this place of actually learning consciousness instead of actually expressing yourself some other way. You're expanding your consciousness in a new paradigm. And when I was in that stage, I was going to write a book. I was going to write a book called $3.99 a Minute, Confessions of a Hotline Psychic. And I found another psychic on the East Coast who wanted to collaborate with me. And I thought that we could do it over, at the time we had Skype, I thought we could do it over Skype, but she said, no, come on out here, let's work on it together. And I got there and I got this really warm reception on the first day. And by the second day, she decided that she got cold feet on the project. And I had already flown all the way from LA to Washington, D.C. to
Oh,
work
no.
on this book. And so I said, well, that's okay or whatever. But for whatever reason, she decided that it wasn't just cold feet about the book. She decided to get cold toward me. So I realized it was time to go, and I couldn't change my ticket. And I ended up I ended up just going somewhere else in Washington, D.C. And I explored around Washington, D.C. or anything. And it was very interesting because it was a very interesting disappointment, like when that old door closes. And in this case, another door hadn't opened yet. It hadn't opened. Normally, you would expect you went on this trip and then all of a sudden, whatever, you met the love of your life or something like that. So I was boarding the plane back for Los Angeles after spending 2 weeks in Washington, D.C., which I hadn't planned on doing anyways. It wasn't on my agenda. And I couldn't necessarily say that I was completely enriched by the experience per se or whatever, that there wasn't anything earth shattering that happened that measured up to be the new door that opened or that the reason that I had flown all the way there. Yeah. So I was on my way and I asked, my angel guides that I speak to, and I said, this doesn't make sense. I came here out of guidance, and, I came here to write that book, and then this happened and that happened or whatever. And all of a sudden I got this space of clarity, and they said, did you ever notice that everything that you choreograph, how it's going to happen, it never happens that way? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, have you ever noticed that everything that's good that happens just comes from out of the blue and you didn't even expect it? And I'm like, yeah. And they said, surrender and release from now on, and the way will find you. Nice. And when I got back to LA, I took a job in a shop where I was doing psychic readings. And the first day I started, I woke up and I heard the angels say, go sign up for film school. And that was when my journey as a filmmaker and as an actor began. That was the new door that opened. And it opened in kind of a funny way, but it happened when all of a sudden I said, you know what, whatever is going to show up is what's meant for me. And that's how it ended up taking off from there.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing that, man. I'll leave everybody with this before we do the final thing here. Reverend Beckwith says, ask the question, what is wanting to reveal itself through you? So let that sit with you. Seph, thank you so much for your time. If people want to reach out, connect with you, you do a tarot reading or a hypno session or something like that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I teach tarot classes. I have tarot cards that I am about to get printed. I teach that. I also do readings and hypnotherapy. And I also do readings with people where you bring your tarot cards and I help you do that as well. I'm setting up my the new website to reflect all this. But my website is talktomyangels.com, and you can reach out to me through that, or probably within the next week. Well, depending on when you watch this, the new website will be all set up with all of these offerings. So
yeah, I'll put all that in the information below in the video and stuff. So.
And if you were touched by something in here, send out a note that said this really touched my life. That is worth gold to me too. So
yeah. So thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Love you, man. And this has been a great time. Yeah. And for all you out there, hope you enjoyed this. I know I sure did.
Blessings.
Thanks.
Thank you.